Hello and welcome to Code Harvest. This is a step-by-step tutorial video on how to create a product page for an e-commerce website by using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, where we also include UI designs such as sliders, animations, and so on. Now this e-commerce specifically sells electronics and the company name we created for it is eLife. Now, due to how long the full tutorial is, we have separated it into different videos and parts. So this is part 2 of the product page tutorial. So you can check out the full playlist in the description and also in the top comment down below. Now, we also created a tutorial for the home page of the website. So the link to the video is in the description below as well. Now subscribe to Code Harvest, and now let's get started.
So we'll create a new div, but also before that we'll create comment. And so we'll call this section main body. So this will help us to navigate through our HTML document, because this HTML document is going to be really long. This at the moment only has 59 lines, but the whole document in itself will, when we're done, it will have approximately 800, almost 1,000. So get ready. Okay, so we'll create an ID and we will call this product page body. So this will have a certain style and layout that should be applied throughout the whole body, and we'll create another div. So this will mark the top section of our body. So now this is like the body element, and now we're creating our first element inside the body, which is going to be what we're designing now. And we'll create another comment and we'll call this top section. As simple as that. And our ID will also be product top, but we call it container. And then inside we will create another div element and we will call it wrapper. So as mentioned earlier, usually a container is used to hold a whole section or creator. It's like the creator or the holder of a section, but a wrapper is basically it's like a container, but because it does hold elements, but it basically is responsible for designing the section that it is carrying. So it's responsible for the layout and the design and the styling of the section. So this will have two sections as well. So the first section is going to be the text section, and the second one is going to be the image section. So now we'll create an ID, and inside we will call it product. We'll make it something understandable, so we'll call it product top text section. And then our second child element of the product top wrapper is image section. So something as simple as that. So now we work on the on the text section. So inside, first we'll create, it's going to have two headings and it's going to have a little paragraph. So we'll create the first heading. And actually the first heading will have a smaller font size, but we're not going with font size, we're just going based on the positioning. So we'll first create the first heading. We're just going to use it based on the position it is inside the wrapper. So this one we'll call it latest trending. So this will have a smaller font size than the second heading that we're going to add. And then for the second heading, we'll call it wireless headphones, since we're also going to be displaying an image of a headphone. Now inside we'll also create a paragraph, so we can select that. We can create that by using the p tag, and we'll include some lorem ipsum text. Alright, so now we're going to go on our search tab, and here we'll just type in lorem ipsum and we'll find a free generator. Usually this one is the one that I use, and you can generate it from here. We want it by paragraphs, so we can just select a random text, copy it, and now you can see that the text is behind the navigation bar. I'll tell you why later on when we work on the CSS properties, but yeah, so I'll keep it there for now. So now we're going to include the button. So that's the last thing that will be included in the top text section, and the title will be shop now, and we'll add a class which we'll also be using throughout the whole document called blue button. So this blue button will have a specific background color, and will have a specific font weight, not really padding, there'll be different paddings, but background color, text color, font weight, etc. And also how it reacts when we hover around the button and what color changes into. Alright, so now we're going to be working on the product top image section. So what we want to do is include an image tag, and we'll include the source attribute. Basically, this is, of course, once again, the file path in which the image we want to include is in. So we basically kept it in the images folder, and we also made a folder called product page. So this is where all the images inside the product page would be. So everything product page related is in here, and we basically we didn't keep it in a section. So these are all the categories, but this is the image that we're going to include, called top headphones. Obviously, you can name it based on what image you're including. So the folder, we kept it in this product page, and we named it top headphones. And now the alternative text that we wanted to have, in case the browser has not loaded the image yet, is large beige, light beige headphones. And we'll close the tag. Alright, so now we are completely done with the HTML side. Now, of course, you can see that all of the images are on top. And so we'll tell you the reason why once we start with the CSS properties. So first of all, in our CSS file, we want to scroll down, and here we're going to create a new comment in our CSS file, and we will call this the product page's main body. Okay, so now we're going to first work on the product page main body. Actually, the spacing here is unnecessary, but we'll just leave it. So product page body, we'll select it, and since it is an ID, we'll select with the hashtag symbol. So all we want to add is the padding that the body should have. So every single thing that we're going to have, they all must be within a spacing of about 100 pixels. But we don't want it to have 100 pixels on both vertically and horizontally. But we only want the spacing to be horizontally, so left and right spacing. We don't really want top and bottom spacing. So what we're going to do is, instead of doing this, padding left 100 pixels, and then once again copying that and repeating it and just changing the name to padding right, the padding property basically has two places. So you're able to do this. So 100 pixels, you're able to keep in two values. So this is responsible for the vertical aspect, and this is responsible for the horizontal aspect. What we want to work on is we want the spacing to be there horizontally. So we're going to, as we said, we want the spacing to be in the horizontal aspect, so left and right. Then this one should be set to 0, since for the top and bottom we don't want any padding space or spacing at all. So now instead of making two lines of padding left and padding right, we can just keep it in one line, which is amazing. Alright, so now let's create a new comment, and we're gonna call it the top section of main body. Alright, so inside we're going to start by selecting the first container, or the main container of this top section, and since it is an ID, we'll select with the hashtag, and we basically want padding a specific amount of padding space, because obviously they're all on top. Alright, so the reason why all of the elements are on top and they're not really below the navigation bars, because earlier we set the navigation element to have a fixed position, and the fixed position basically causes an element to move out of the document flow. So it is still technically part of the document, but it does not follow the document. Now, even though the navigation bar is on top, so it should be on top of the HTML document, because we set it to position fixed, it basically has a fixed position, so a fixed X and Y position in the web page, so it can't really move, so it's really out of the document, the HTML document structure. So now we're going to set the padding space to 125 pixels. So now we can see it properly. Now the reason why margin won't work, so margin is basically spacing outside an element, is because when we set a margin spacing, even though the elements are basically on top of the HTML document, will basically create spacing above the HTML document. So now they're spacing, out of the HTML document itself. So, and as we also said earlier, the navigation bar has a fixed position. The product tab container, ignores the navigation bar basically, like it acts as if it does not exist. So we will change it back to padding where it creates padding space, where it creates spacing within the element or within the container. And then padding bottom, which is going to be a different value, is going to be 50 pixels, so it's unrelated to the problem. It's just going to create a space in between this section and the next section that we're going to add later on. Now we also want it to have a flexible layout, so we'll use the flexible CSS property, and we will make sure that everything is justified to the center. Alright, so now we are going to be working on the wrapper itself. So we will, and since it is an ID, we'll select with a hashtag, and what we want to do is set the background color, and we'll set it to something light blue. So I found a good hex color, so we'll set it to EDF2FB, which happens to be a nice color combination, a nice shade of blue. Next, we're also going to set the width and the height. So the width can be about 100 pixels, not pixels, but 100%. And the height, we will set it to something around 320 pixels. But you can see the image flows over or out of the wrapper, but we don't want that. So we're going to use a property called overflow hidden, which basically hides any elements that overflows the element itself or the container itself. Alright, so now we're going to be using padding in order to create padding within the elements, so it does not look really congested and it's easy to the eyes. And now we're also going to set a certain border radius, so we want the corners to be round. We did use border radius earlier in order to make a full circle, which will in the span element. But now we don't want it to be a full circle, but we want it to have round corners. So we'll set the border radius to something small as 5 pixels. So you can see that it will look, you can see the rounded corner, but it is kind of subtle, which is what we want. And now we will include the flexible layout. Alright, so now we have set it to flexible layout, so everything is now in one row, but still we want to use the flex direction, and we want to specify that it needs to be in one line horizontally. We did not specify the flex direction here because it was not really as important. We just wanted the wrapper to be horizontally centered, that's all. Now another thing is we also want the items to be vertically centered, because right now they seem to be leaning towards the bottom side. So we will use the property place items. So now you can see that they kind of fill the whole document. So obviously we'll change the image size because the image size is causing a little disproportion. So we'll change it very soon. Now the last thing that we're going to add is we want the elements inside the wrapper to have space in between. So we use the space between property. And now we're finally done with the wrapper. Next, we're going to work on the top section of the wrapper, and since it is an ID, once again we'll use a hashtag. So we will not set it to anything, but we do want it to, because we don't really want to use a flexible layout, but we do want to set the width size, and we want it to take up 52% of the wrapper. But of course right now it will not change because of the image. So now we will be working on the first heading. So we can select the first heading by the ID name that it is in. And what we want to do is we want to set the color text first. So we will use the same color that we used for the text color in the links above in the navigation bar. So we'll go with 64, 64, 64, and we will change the font size to be around 23 pixels, and obviously it looks too thick. So we'll also change the font weight to be 500, but we want something, but we could have changed it to 400, but then it looks too thin. So again, we want something in between 400 and 500, so we'll use the WebKit font smoothing. Now we're going to work on the second heading. So we'll change this to H2, and this one will have similar properties. However, it won't have the WebKit fonting. But this one will have the same color but different font size. So this one will be slightly bigger. So we'll set it to 45 pixels, and the font weight, but we'll keep the font weight as it is. It looks good as it is. So once again, even though this is a bigger heading, we're not really naming the headings based on how big it is or the font size, but based on what position it takes in the wrapper. Alright, so now we're going to work on the paragraph. Whoops. As that is the next thing in the wrapper. So we'll use the ID to select it. And this one will rather have a different font color. It will be something much lighter than 64. We just wanted to have a font, a sweet, a lighter font, something more soft. So we will go with 137. Then we want the font size to be regular, so we'll go with 16 to 17 pixels. And we wanted to have a spacing between the heading and the text or the paragraph itself. So we'll set this to about 10 pixels, so not too much. And also, because there is going to be a button, we're going to set below it. We're going to set the spacing to something larger. So we're going to set it to 25 pixels. And finally, we're going to increase the line height slightly to something around 1.7. Alright, so you could say that line height is basically spacing between a number of rows of text. So for example, line height would be the spacing between here and here. So we kept it to 1.7, and basically, we did not set it to any pixel value, but we could. But basically 1.7 basically acts as a multiplier, and it is basic. And if we wanted to convert line height to pixels, then it would be the equivalence. Then 1.7 would be the equivalent of the font size value, which is 17 pixels, multiplied by 1.7. So 8.9 pixels would be the same as 1.7. So you can see that the spacing did not really change. But we just kept it at 1.7 because it's more easy, simple, and convenient. Alright, so now we're going to work on the button. So once again, we used a class this time. So we're going to select the name of the class. And in order to select a class, we use a dot and then the name of the class. So inside this class, we want to have a certain background. And this, once again, this class will be used by all the buttons around throughout this whole HTML document. So all of the buttons in this HTML document will have a certain background color, and we will set it to #3. So it's also a similar shade of the Ecommerce company logo, which is around 3B. I found a good combination. So now you can see that they're slightly similar. Now we also want to have the font color to be white, not really black. We also want, since we've already removed the border in the beginning, we don't need to add the border CSS property. Now we're going to set the font size to 16 pixels, the font weight to 500, and we want something in between 400 and 500, because 500 is too thick, 400 too thin, once again, so we'll use the WebKit font smoothing property. And the last thing we're going to include is the transition. So we're going to add a hovering effect. So we want the button color to transition from this blue to something lighter blue. So we're going to slow down the color change by 0.3 seconds, both when the mouse enters or hovers around the button and when it exits the button, or when it stops hovering the button. And so now we're going to include the hover property. So we're going to select that and include the hover keyword with a colon and the hover keyword. And what we want to do is change the background color. And I found a really good combination, a good RGB value of 102, 136, and 240. When you hover around the button, you can see that it changes color and it creates a nice glow to the button. But now, obviously, the button still does not look the best because there's no padding inside the button. There's no spacing at all inside the button, so we have to change that. But throughout the button, as they're all going to have the same background color, background color text, as well as font size and font weight, we want to have different paddings throughout the HTML document. So some of them are going to be smaller in size, some of them are going to be bigger in size, and we're going to determine that based on the padding. So we're going to select the parent element of the button, which is product top text section. And since that is an ID, we'll use a hashtag. And what we want to do is set the padding or the spacing inside to be 15 pixels vertically, so top and bottom should be 15 pixels, and left and right should have 45 pixels, or should be 45 pixels. So it should be wider than taller. Now another thing is, it looks like a square, but we want it to be slightly more round. So we'll use the border radius property, and we'll set it to 5 pixels, so the same value as the one we set for the wrapper. And last but not least, we're going to change the font size to 17 pixels. So actually I will change and remove this. So now it looks really good on the text section. Now we have to change the image section. So now we're going to select the ID. So we're almost done with this section, and because it is an ID, we'll select it with a hashtag. And what we want to do is specify the width and the height that it should have. Actually, let's set the background color that it should have. And basically, we want it to have a much darker, we want it to be a much darker shade of blue than the wrapper. So we'll set it to a hexadecimal value of C7D5F1. So this is a good color combination that I found. Another thing is, we want to change the width and the height. So we'll set it to 40 pixels, and we need it to have the same height. Why? Because we're going to make it into a circle. So the whole image section will be a circle rather than a square. So we want it to have the same size so that it avoids turning into an oval. So now the next thing that we're going to add is the border radius in order to convert it to a circle or make it to a circle. So once again, any value that is 50% or greater. So for example, if I set it to 100%, it would still stay as a circle. And now we're going to set up we're going to include a flexible layout that the image should follow. So basically what we want to do is set a flexible layout. And now we're going to include the justify content property, and we're going to set it to the center of the circle. And we also want it to be vertically centered. So we'll use place items, and we want it to be centered vertically as well. And now we will add a box shadow. And whoops, the image seems to have enlarged again. That's fine. We will set the image size very soon. So now we also want to change the box shadow. And box shadow is basically a property that creates a shadow effect around an element. So there's going to be a little shadow effect around the circle element. So the first value of the box shadow property is the X value. The second value is the Y value. And the third value, so now you can see we set the box shadow to be 20 pixels lower. If we, for example, set it to 0, then we won't really see it because it is within or inside. So, but we want the box shadow to be 20 pixels below the element. And then we want, and also if we wanted to set the X value to 20 pixels, it would be to the right. And if we wanted it to be to the left, then we could set it to a negative value and it would be to the left. But we don't want any of that, so we'll keep it to 0. And now the third value is going to affect how blurry or how soft the box shadow looks like. Because right now it just looks straight. It just looks straight. It doesn't really look like. I mean, it just looks too sharp. So we're going to change the value to something like 50 pixels. So now you can see that it creates a proper shadow because it looks like it was drawn, so it was not really realistic. But this is a more realistic box shadow. Now it looks too black, so we're going to change the the color of the box shadow. So we're going to use the RGB value. We're going to change the RGB value, and in order to change that, we're going to have to include another ledger to the RGB value, and we're going to use A. And A basically stands for alpha. but this basically affects how transparent the box shadow looks like. So, for example, if you set it to 0 and we did not set the alpha value or the opacity, it basically is like an opacity property. So it basically affects how transparent a box shadow looks like. So we have not set it yet. So now we're going to set the fourth value or the alpha value, and let's go with 1. So that means it would be completely black. Now we want the black box shadow to be something slightly lighter. So we'll go with 0.5, and you will see how it looks way lighter than black. So the transparency has increased, but we're going to change it, and we're going to make it a little more transparent. So we're going to set it to a lower value of 0.2. So we want the box shadow to be seen, but we also want it to be subtle. So we want it to have a 3D effect, because the box shadow creates a 3D effect, but we want it to be subtle. So you'll be able to see that it is 3D, but you won't be able to tell easily, which is what we want to create, a soft mode, and it creates a soft modern look. So now we're going to change the properties of the image. So we're going to select the section name, which is the product top image section, and we're going to select the image element. And what we want to do is, instead of changing or setting the width and the height property, because sometimes it might change and it will not make the image responsive to other screens, whether it be mobile or iPad screens, smaller screens, and the image might go over the circle. We're only going to set the height property, and we're going to set it to 82%. So now you can see that the image takes up 82%, so that's almost 80% of the image. And the width is already automatic, but other browsers may not have it by default, so we're going to set it ourselves, and we're going to set the width to be automatic. Alright, so now we're going to create this little UI design. So UI basically stands for user interface, and it basically is a type of design where when a user basically interacts with an element in the HTML document, or basically the website or the web page, something happens. For example, if a user hovers around a button, the button changes, something different happens. So that means a user has interacted with the blue button. So that is a UI design. Or when a link changes color, then that is also a UI design, because a user has caused something to change. Or even when we're going to scroll down, that is also a UI design, because when the user scrolls down, a box shadow will appear and also disappear when the user scrolls back up. So that is also a UI design. So now we're going to create an animation UI type of design. So when the user hovers around, when the user's mouse hovers around this circle, this object, which is basically the whole image section, then an animation should be carried out where the headphones basically, or the whole object should basically shake. So right now we're going to create a new selector. We're going to select the image, or actually we're going to select the whole section, and we want the animation to happen when the user hovers or puts their mouse onto the object. So we're going to put the hovering the hovering keyword, and here we're just going to write animation, and we're going to call it shake. And basically we want the transition to happen within we want the animation to carry out for 0.5 seconds. So we're gonna go with 0.5 seconds, and so if the lower the number of seconds, the faster the animation takes place, and it won't really look smooth. So that's why we increase it to 0.5 seconds. We don't want it to be too slow, so we didn't set it to, for example, 1 full second. We also want the animation to be smooth, so we want the shake to not be rigid, or robotic, but we want it to be smooth, so linear helps with that. And we want it to take place infinity times, so we want it to keep going, so kind of like a loop, until the user leaves, or they're not hovering around the whole object anymore. Another thing is, when we hover around the whole object, or the element product top image section, we want the cursor to turn into a pointer. So for example, right now we want it to turn into this white hand. So that helps. So that element, the CSS property helps with that, so it kind of looks great. And now let's create the animation itself. So what we need to do is put in an @ and we're going to add keyframes. So there's going to be keyframes in which, so it takes place in 0.5 seconds. So we're going to give it keyframes on what it's going to do. At 0 at first, in the middle, and towards the end. So, and now we have to call out the animation name, which is shake. So obviously the animation name could be anything that you want to choose. It could be shake or shaky or earthquake, because we want to create a similar effect, or vibrate maybe. So at first we want the animation, we don't want the animation to move. I mean the object or the circle to move at all. So we're going to use the transform property, and we're going to use rotate, and we basically don't want anything to move, so we're going to keep it at 0 degrees. So we want it to rotate, but we want it to rotate in a shaky manner. So in order to create that shaky animation, we are going to use the rotate property. So we want it to rotate left, right, but only by a little amount, not a big amount like 90 degrees, just a little amount. So the next, so we're going to do it like 0%, 25%, 50%, 75%, 100%. So 0% being the first 0.1 second, and then 25%, 0.2 seconds into the animation, and then 0.25 would be halfway through the animation. So 50%, 75% would be almost done, third quarter of the animation, and 100% would be when the animation is done at the end of the animation. So at 0.5 seconds basically. So at 25 seconds, or at 25%, which is at 0.1 seconds, what we want to do is we want the animation to transform slightly. So we want it to rotate by only 3 degrees. So as I said, we want it to rotate a little, so not like 90 degrees or something huge, or not even 45 degrees, but something little in order to create a shaky effect. Not really a whole moving effect. So I'm just going to copy this and paste this. So now halfway through the animation, so at 0.25 seconds into the animation, we want it to go back to 0. So we want it to go from 0, from where it is at the moment, 3 degrees, and then back to 0. And then we're going to copy that and paste that again. So now it's going to be 75%. Now when the animation is almost done, we'll go with 3 degrees, back to 3 degrees, but we don't want it to go to the same way. We want it to go to a different direction. So we're going to go with -3. So first it starts at 0, at where it is currently, then 3 degrees, and then back to 0, then -3 degrees. And when the animation is done, it should obviously go back to its initial position, which is at 0 degrees. So now let's see the animation if it works. So now let's reload our page, and now you can see that it shakes. So but then it keeps repeating because we added the infinity value into the CSS property. Alright, so now we're done, we're completely done with the top section of our product page.
And now we are at the end of part 2. Thank you so much for watching this video. Please do give this video a thumbs up, comment down below, and also subscribe to Code Harvest if you have not already. And see you in part 3 of the eLife web series.